Alright friends, how's it going? Zig coming in at the top of the interview. Today I have with me Tobias Nathaniel. Now, Tobias is one of those guys who's been a part of a million things, and his career is really deep, but he's the guy in the shadows lurking, making everything sound sick. So, he plays in a band called The Red Step, which is his current project, which you're going to hear a song of before the interview. And he was in a band called the Black Heart Procession. That was his main kind of band. Career-wise, he was in 3 Mile Pilot, he was in Blond, Redhead, and a plethora more of projects. A really cool guy, really well-read, really well-spoken. I couldn't have asked for a cooler guy to chat with. We're going to dive into it. We're going to listen to the first single they put out, which is Black Summer. Check this out. Length coming out soon. We'll listen to one more at the end of the podcast. So before we get into the interview, friends, if you can like, rate, subscribe, review the podcast, or hang out with us on YouTube, which we're now a part of. If you can hit the subscribe button and share the videos, it'd be greatly appreciated. It would help me keep doing this and having cool conversations and sharing them. So here we go. Tobias Nathaniel. Jump right into it then. We're doing the Zig At The Gig podcast. I'm hanging out with Tobias Nathaniel. And how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing fine. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks so much for doing this. So now where are you exactly?
I am in Belgrade, Serbia.
Okay. Wow, man. So I thought, for some reason, I totally thought you were somewhere else. I thought you were in England for some reason. But,
nope.
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah.
Wow. So how'd you end? Because you're from California, right?
Yeah, from San Diego originally, and then I lived in Portland, Oregon for 12 years, so I have a pretty strong connection there with the Pacific Northwest. And so how'd I end up in Belgrade? Well, there's this delightful spirit here that people drink called rakia. And I was hanging out with some friends, and someone had brought a bottle of this stuff to the States. I tasted it, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, I could taste the culture. And I figured, I don't know, something that good, I should probably, come check it out. And so I ended up, coming over and just stayed.
Wow. Chase the wine to the vine.
I'm kidding. My wife is from Belgrade.
Oh, okay. Well, that would do it too.
But no, incidentally, it's super funny. The Bill Gould, the bassist of Faith No More, actually has a brand of rakia that I'm not sure if it's distributed yet throughout all of the states. It might just be California for now.
Yeah.
But he literally, I believe, fell in love with rakia when he was over here in the Balkans and decided to, produce it himself. Or I think it's produced here in Serbia, but distributed there. Wow. And it's the classic kind. It's called Šljivovica. It's a plum variety. It's kind of like sorry, I didn't explain it. It's kind of like brandy.
Okay.
So and oddly enough, his brand is called the Jebiga, which loosely translates to fuck it or fuck that. It's a common slang phrase. People are like, oh, damn it. Like, Jebiga.
It's up there. Oh, snap. Hold on. It's up there. There we go. Sorry, my recorder thing peaked, but it was still recording, so we're good. But it's up there. It's, I don't know. It's on brand with those guys, I guess.
Totally.
You've done a lot of work with a lot of different groups, man. Like, your collab sheet is pretty dense. Have you done work with Faith No More? Any of their projects?
Unfortunately not. Not that I wouldn't be, interested, but nope. Not so far.
That's cool.
But who knows with this Serbian connection and rakia, it's cool.
It's interesting to kind of touch upon that, like how certain things from a culture can draw you into it. If it's a taste, if it's a sound, if it's a sight, there's something so like appealing about different like senses from different places that can totally captivate you into it. Like I had a buddy who was really into he's studying film now, but he really got into Moroccan whiskey, which is like a tea almost, right? It's like this tea with this mint, and like he ended up going to Morocco for a while.
Okay, so those kind of stories do exist. All right.
Yeah. Like
it wasn't impossible, and you've got a personal experience with it. Yeah, great.
it's so fascinating what draws you to a culture, draws you in, and like I don't know, that's really cool. How long have you been there?
Yeah, so so my wife is from here, and that's why I ended up landing here. But no, it's super interesting. I've been here for a little over 5 years, and it is an interesting place. And prior to having moved here, it's very mysterious. I had never really spent much time in the Balkans. We had, of course, toured a lot, but usually Belgrade is a little bit difficult to get to. You might have to fly in. It's not exactly on the usual tour circuit. Sometimes people make it to Zagreb, but as far as Zagreb, and it's possible to get here. It's just not easy. Yeah. So not having spent much time here, I started looking it up online, and then when I came here, it's very different than what we're used to in the West. Everything looks crazy. There's we've got like Austro-Hungarian architecture, kind of from here to the north, Novi Sad, which is a town just a little bit like 40 minutes north of here, and then Subotica, which is close to the border of Hungary, has some amazing architecture. Here in Belgrade, I live actually in New Belgrade, which is across the river from the center. Yeah. And here it's like a brutalist architecture appreciator's dream. It's just these crazy, huge, monolithic, utilitarian, concrete, gray, dour buildings. It's just awesome. I really actually dig the architecture. I think it takes a certain kind of person to appreciate it. But that and the Cyrillic language, there's a different, writing system as well. It's like they have Latin and Cyrillic, but everything was so mysterious and interesting, and absolutely, it's very appealing, and it's super cool, fun, mysterious to move to a new place and sort of absorb things.
That's amazing. I don't know. I'm stuck in Cleveland, but I'm all right with that. But I've always wanted to just explore. I get hyped up to go to a different state, and that's essentially the same thing. You know what I mean? So to go to a completely different country and like to live there, like how you are, that has to be super exciting. And the architecture describing kind of reminds me a little bit of your style and music. Like oddly enough, that makes sense. Like that you would be drawn to it.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely a connection.
So, kind of before I leave the topic of that, music-wise, what's it like there? Is there like a scene, and does the scene work differently than it would here in the States?
A little bit. Like, I'll start by saying it's like, in my experience, a little bit fragmented, but that's not necessarily true. Like, I remember back in the days of San Diego scene, we had like, a scene and then a number of sub-scenes. Yeah. And then at some point, those scenes begin to cross over. People start playing with each other. So I suppose it's like that here. I mean, there's a very rich kind of musical scene here in the 80s, like ex-Yugoslavia rock. So a lot of great bands out of there, like Katarina Velika, Disciplina Kičme, House Door. So there's a strong history of music in this region, especially for it being sort of like communist light back then. One of the few regions in the area that had a sort of thriving music scene. And as for now, yeah, there's great stuff. Like there's a label called Pop Depression. Our friend Ivan Lancharovic, a lot of great stuff on there. Bands like Stray Dog and Anna Turchin, this solo artist, great singer. And then my friend Urosh's studio, it's called Down There Studios. I've spent quite a bit of time there, and there's a lot of interesting, cool, weird stuff coming out of there. And especially from like the younger generation. And I'm really happy to see that. They're kind of combining things in a tasteful, strange, cool way, like proggy, but with kind of post-punk. And yeah, so there's definitely a scene.
That's awesome. It's super interesting that like just that it's all going on. It seems like it doesn't seem too different how you're describing it. Like it sounds like how you're saying like different. Like there's always going to be scenes and stuff, but like that's super. I don't know. That's cool, and it's interesting. It's cool that you're getting involved with the studio, and are you helping out like with these younger bands and like doing studio work with that, or just observing?
Well, I had this idea actually for a while to kind of like start working at the studio as like an engineer, producer. And so I spent a lot of time there with that in mind. And yeah, that's how I saw them. And also Red Step recorded there.
Gotcha.
And at down their studio. And Uroš, incidentally, the guy who runs it is Black Heart Processions live. Did our last few tours.
Oh, nice.
Live sound.
Yeah.
So, and he also co-produced with me the Red Step record. So I, hung out there quite a bit for various reasons. But it's cool what's coming out, and I'm hopeful.
That's exciting. That's super exciting. That's weird how like small the world is to some degree. Did that kind of lead to how you met your wife, or did you meet the sound tech through your wife, kind of, or was that completely different?
It's actually an interesting story. So I met Uroš, who's the guy I'm in question, the studio, through Rudy, who's the bass player of Red Step, and who is also my cum, which is something like a combination of Godfather and Best Man.
Okay.
Here, so I think how this worked is, of course they knew each other, but they have a connection through VW stuff. They're into like VW buses.
All right.
And so Rudy mentioned to Uroš, I think at some point, like, oh, here's this dude from the States. It's this guy. And Uroš is very like aware of stuff, and he knew about Black Heart. And so he's like, oh, you should, come over to the studio. So that's how I met Uroš. And another like indirect.
Wow.
So slightly direct.
Well,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's all that stuff that's indirect that ends up leading to you moving there. And like, that's, they get involved with the studio with the kind of work you do, because you dabble with everything. And I want to get into the Red Step in a minute more directly, but you like, with looking at the credits of what you've played on some of these albums, like there's some instruments I had to look up, like the Octagon. Like, that is a sick instrument where you run those records in it, and it's like an organ that plays those records.
Exactly. It's like a demented mellotron. It's a really awesome sounding, and it sounds like it's about to fall apart at like, any minute.
It's so cool, but how you compose with it. But as far as like tracing, like, where's this guy coming from? It's hard to tell, because you like make this like beautiful layer of sound with all these different projects that you've done. So did you start on piano? I know this is kind of a side turn but did you start on piano, or did you start with guitar, or did you just start?
First of all, thank you for the compliments. So yeah, I started with guitar. Let's see. The medium to long version is. When I was younger, I had I'm left-handed, and so my parents, I was into guitar. I used to sit around listening to Pink Floyd, The Wall, and Dark Side of the Moon, and some Yes records on 8-track tape, actually, with headphones. And so they're like, oh, he's into rock. Let's get him some kind of instrument. And it ended up being like a left-handed ukulele, which that didn't stick around long. And then later on, I got this kind of like Sears special shitty, electric guitar and amplifier combo thing. And that sort of didn't last long. And at one point, I think
physically didn't last long. Like it fell apart. Like the instrument or interest didn't last long.
I think probably both.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you out, but
no, not at all. And then what really kind of got me going was I was hanging out with a friend when I was around 15, and he's like, have you heard this band Metallica? And I'm like, no. And well, I actually had heard of them. It's not totally true, but I hadn't really listened. And so he had Master of Puppets put it on vinyl, and it was like just like a whole world opened that I had no idea existed before. So just like everything about that album was amazing, like the energy, the aggression, the sophistication, complexity. It just like completely blew me away. And just these like homages to, kind of some sort of classical sounding like harmonies. So then I started playing thrash guitar, and I was like, I gotta do this. So thrash guitar was my first instrument. And I got into bands like, Coroner, Testament, of course, Megadeth, all that stuff.
That's awesome. I mean, those, as far as like theory-wise and like attitude-wise, thrash bands are where it's at, especially with like Megadeth and Metallica. Like, they break into some complicated things, and it's not like, which kind of hearing that, like, your music's got this like aura, this space that you create with all these different sounds, and like coming from Pink Floyd, that's a band that has like a space, you know what I mean? Like, and it's starting to make more sense to now that I'm hearing some of your influences, where the sound that you make, that you've curated throughout your career, has kind of come from. So what brought? Sorry, you were about to say something.
Oh no, I was going to say we're developing a theme here of indirect.
Yeah.
Throughout of the talk, yeah, sort of like indirect things, just things that were embedded early, that kind of stuck around. And a lot of people think that I am a classically trained pianist, and I'm not. And it came from this other way around. Like, I gained appreciation for that stuff indirectly.
Gotcha. Which makes sense. So coming from the guitar, when did piano become the way of emoting expression? Like,
yeah. So after having done thrash guitar for a while, my high school at the time, which was one of the few left that had a music curriculum, they were like cutting all that stuff like viciously back then. This would have been like 89 or something, and so I started meeting people through doing metal and whatever, and they're like, you should join this the school jazz band. And in order to join, it was required that you studied jazz theory, and take lessons from someone who they approved or suggested that you take specific instrument lessons with. So I started doing that, ended up, playing and studying jazz for a while. And then after high school, I kind of stopped doing music, and I would sit down with the guitar once in a while, and I don't know, like, I would hear something in my head, and I would sit down at the guitar, and my fingers would just like screw it all up. Like, I'm like, that's not it. My fingers are doing these jazz patterns or thrash something. So it was causing a problem. So a little bit later, I had moved into this punk rock house, and we had a Hammond B3 in the basement. And I was like, this is interesting. And I remember sitting at that thing and going like, I have no idea what I'm doing on this. And my fingers, just started, playing things. And like the idea there, what ended up happening is that like the idea, because I didn't have any real like technique on that particular instrument or knowledge of what to do where these patterns would emerge and sort of take over. I think the idea, whatever was in my head, there was a closer connection to what ended up coming out. And so I kind of dropped guitar for a while and started exploring this other instrument. And fortunately, I had, enough technique, training and ability to, kind of fake it along well enough. Or I understood the basis of it in order to develop it on my own. So that's how keyboards and piano started.
Gotcha. Interesting. Because so with jazz, when you were studying jazz, it was on guitar?
Yes.
Okay. It kind of makes a lot of sense, because to some degree with jazz, or with I think of Indian classical music, like, you study these patterns, right, so much, and when it comes time to actually playing, you kind of try to ignore that, and you break all these rules, and but it's because you studied everything so intensely that when it comes time to express, there's not there's this freedom out of this rigid studying, which can lead to some weird turns. It makes me think of there's this Bruce Lee quote with today the classical man dies and is born the Bruce Lee that we know, right? So he moved on from all these rigid styles and structure to just become this thing where he was expressing himself in a different way, which was a combination of all these different things. So it's really interesting that for you, it was this instrument that led to this instrument that you haven't played before.
Oh yeah, so we were at the Bruce Lee thing.
Okay.
This is sort of classicism and then breaking the rules.
Yeah. So right, like you're stuck in this classical structure, and you study all these different styles. And when it comes down to like expressing yourself, it ends up being this combination of all these things and not a specific style. So it's interesting for you that learning all this like technique and all these different styles and stuff on one particular instrument, when you came to this different instrument, it just became, like how you said, closer to what you were thinking and feeling, and just came out that way.
Absolutely. There's sort of 2 points there. Like, I understand what you're saying. Absolutely. And I think there's this like amalgamation of things swirling around in your head that you've heard before. And they sort of create something weird on their own. So this also sort of, I don't know, combination of weird things. And then, yeah. And again, for me with the piano, I wanted to shed a lot of this technique and theory, because it wasn't working in terms of what I wanted to do and what I was hearing. So, it takes there's all kinds of ways to write and do things. For me, that worked out. And now I'm comfortable on guitar again. I kind of got rid of those limiting things, and am now able to kind of, like you mentioned, utilize those things I've learned. I rarely use jazz theory, but it can help from time to time. And like, am I stuck on a harmony note? Okay, that'll do. But
it's hip now. It's chromatic. It works. It's bop. It's interesting that that's how it ended up being. But so you were in this punk house, right, with this B3 organ, and like, what led to Day Called Zero? Was that those times?
Exactly. So Day Called Zero, I played bass. There's actually a band before, if we want to start, unless you want to talk about it later, Struggle, which is a hardcore band. So that was still in the guitar days.
Got you. Okay.
So from that was kind of like my first like published thing. Yeah. Playing kind of metal-y sounding hardcore stuff. And then, yes, exactly. So at this punk rock house, which was called the Winder Street House, there was actually a band that was concurrent with Day Called Zero called the Young Destroyers. And that band was pretty garagey, sort of spooky. It was bass, organ, drums, and vocals, kind of garagey, a little bit dubby.
Okay.
And so the organ, I was organ there. Okay. And then at the same time, this guy, my good friend Josh Kwan, he played drums in the Young Destroyers and guitar. He wrote these amazing guitar lines for A Day Called Zero. So I played bass in Day Called Zero, but both of those bands were happening at the same time.
Gotcha. Yeah. When I was looking into your career, man, there's a lot going on, and you're kind of sometimes you're credited as Tobias and Toby, and then like wait, which one is which? So okay, but that makes sense, because that's how life is. When you're doing music, you want to be in as many things as possible, because there's no guarantee that anything's going to pan out. You know what I mean? So like, especially at the beginning, you're trying to latch on to anything that seems like it's going to be fun or promising or something you want to be involved in.
Sure, yeah, and the music from that time that we were making, just kind of an extension of our, values and what we were doing. And the funny thing is that back then, a band like A Day Called Zero would be considered emo before emo earned its new moniker.
Yeah, it was the Ian MacKaye emo. I'm trying to think of
the old school emo. Yes, exactly. Even I think bands like Unwound were like at that time considered some kind of emo post-punk, noise. Genres are weird. I don't like genres. Yeah. And like, I don't like the genres.
Yeah, I was talking to Mike Watt, and he's got this whole spiel about genres, but like with emotional, well, all music's emotional to some degree. Like, and if it's not, I don't know if it's music, but like, where's that coming from? Or indie or alternative rock? What's the qualification that makes these genres or these bands, these genre, besides who they hang out with?
Totally. Yeah. It's a strange concept. And, I don't know, what matters to me pretty much primarily is genuineness and taste. Yeah. So I think that there are a lot of you could call certain things cross genre or whatever. But if you're real about it and it's coming from some place that you believe in, I think that's really important. And in terms of the taste thing, I mean, there are some like seriously unholy combinations of music that should just not have never existed or never exist, like, whatever genre crossovers. But that's the taste part. It's like, I don't know, for example, with the Red Step, it's sort of garagey, post-punky. And then I was like, ooh, cello would be cool. So, but I had an idea of what the cello should be doing there. It should add some sophistication and, a little bit of melancholy or spookiness and cool harmonic support. So I don't know. I think those things are very important to me. Like, do you mean what you're doing, and like have a sense of taste about it?
Definitely. And like what I feel like with any project or with any band, that's what's going to make it stick out. I think people are more emotionally like attached to something, like, or people wise, like, or personnel wise, right? If someone in that band truly means it, like the band's gonna convey, or like, or if it's the band itself can truly convey itself, people are gonna hitch onto that. It's not gonna be seen as just like that's a cha-cha band in the back. They're holding down the restaurant. When someone truly does something that's like coming from inside them, no matter what, even if it is in a cha-cha band, people are gonna be like, cool. There's just something that's so appealing to people about emotion, about people.
Right. No, I totally agree completely. So but then here's the other news is that, there are a lot of like mainstream huge bands that also mean it. They're also being genuine and they also connect. So I find it funny, this like, when people are very limiting, it's like, I only like this sort of music. And it's like, well, I don't necessarily like, whatever, certain mainstream things, but I'm like, I can tell that they're being genuine and they, so, yeah. And that's why it connects.
No, I agree with that. And I think the more you do it too, with whatever your medium is, and you start to see past certain things, you're like, well, you know what? That guy, that's truly who he is. He's the cha-cha band guy. I don't know why I'm talking about cha-cha music, but he's, what I mean? That's his thing. Like, and there's something so punk rock about that. Like, this the philosophy of someone finding the thing of who they are and what they do, and like, or maybe not the philosophy, but seeing someone who's self-actualized and truly embracing it is so appealing, no matter what it is. Like, and like I agree with what you're saying with like bigger groups. It seems so plastered, and you can kind of like, well, yeah, of course that's how they feel, and if that someone wrote that's why that was the perfect answer to that question. But there's definitely some people who are just up there living their best life, doing the thing they wanted to do, and like I agree. Like, even if it's not your cup of tea, you can at least appreciate someone living their true self to some degree, or to every degree in that case.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I think it makes a difference, for a lot of people. Some people are just, they're like, oh, music, it's sort of a background thing. I mean, this can, transcend the borders of music too, into anything like artwork, visual stuff, film, anything. You get a sense of that genuineness. Definitely. Make a connection with it.
And it's interesting who's appealed to it. Like, I'm a music teacher as a day gig, and like, there's just some kids I can't get through, and that's okay. That sometimes they're more into talking to me than anything I will ever teach them, and like, that's just them. And like, everyone's got something something that appeals to them, and it's interesting when music is like, I find interesting when someone has usually someone's got a thing. They're like, you know what, I like the Pokemon theme, whatever. Like, they're right. There's some piece of music that moves them, but sometimes there's not, and that's totally cool. It's just really profound. I think that someone who's just that it is just a background thing, but a lot of times they're more interested. I'd imagine, like, you've probably come across, if anyone is like that, they're interested in the amount of traveling you've done, or the amount of like, what's that life like, and like, there's some other type of appeal to it.
No, absolutely. And back to the previous point. No, there was a long period of time in my life where I just didn't understand music and why my friends liked it. Like, what is this thing you're listening to on the radio, and why is it cool? But I was like, I'll go along with it because I guess they like it. And then a few things happened. Like I heard like Dead Kennedys and PIL.
Nice.
Kind of, this was like a little bit pre the Metallica thing, but those things stuck with me. And to this day, I love early PIL. Dead Kennedys, there's something super special about them musically, beyond the message.
Yeah.
So yeah, and like those things, like, so I do understand what it's like to just sort of have this ambivalence or just not understanding like why people like what they do.
That's yeah.
Like,
yeah, I totally understand that. Like, was it? Side note, have you heard Jello's new record?
I have not.
Oh man, it's awesome. It's what I would imagine it would be like hearing the Dead Kennedys like in the Reagan era, like, but for this era.
Super nice. I'll check it out directly after.
It's heavy, man. It's awesome.
Awesome. I have no doubt.
So, okay, kind of winding the narrative. When did 3 Mile Pilot, 3 Mile Pilot, when did that start?
They were actually, the story with my involvement with them is that they were a fairly popular band in San Diego, like kind of in the indie alternative scene, and they're actually one of my favorite bands, local bands, and they've been around. I can't remember when they started, late 80s, something like that. Okay. So they were around for a while, and again, this is part of that like scene cross-pollination or like, a bit fragmentation. I had met Paul, the singer, but we weren't always all at the same shows together. And so they had, at some point, like San Diego was starting to get to be considered or like flirted with as the new Seattle. Like, here's the new thing, like bands like Rocket from the Crypt, Drive Like Jehu, 3 Mile Pilot. So a lot of these bands were getting, kind of like swept up by the major labels. And 3 Mile Pilot was one of those. And so they had basically finished a record for Geffen. And they were, before that, just a 3-piece. So the previous record, Chief Assassin to the Sinister, that Paul started playing a little bit of guitar and it's a little bit more kind of noisy guitar. And before that, it was just bass, drums, and vocals. So on Another Desert, Another Sea, they added in the studio a lot of different, like, supplementary parts, organ or guitar parts. And they had finished the record and they came back and they were looking for someone who was a multi-instrumentalist. And so they actually, I think Paul called the Winder Street house where I was living, this punk rock house, and talked to my friend Josh, who was They Called Zero guy. He's like, do you know anyone who can play, kind of everything, like, drums, bass, keyboards, guitar, whatever? And he's like, oh, you should talk to Toby. So Paul and I had met before, but then we talked a bit. Then I went and did a, quote unquote, like, what would it be? Audition. It's just such a stupid word, but it was, it wasn't like an official audition. I went in and played and we all got along really well. And it was clear we there was a good connection, good vibe musically. And so that's how I started with them. And to make this even longer, so the label, of course, as major labels do, they weren't happy with the record and they didn't think there was a single on there. Yeah. So we kind of started writing a little bit together, more with me as a writing component. And that's how I kind of started playing with them. Gotcha.
So while that's super interesting, because like when you're expanding from the record to the live show, it's either you accept that the band did something in the studio and that's the record, and when you see them live, you get something different. And because sometimes trying to add to that adds too much complexity. But it sounds like with the height that they were at, they can totally, I don't want to say financially, but afford to expand like that. And I love the fact that they called the punk house. You know what I mean? There's something so totally pure about all these people in one spot. Like, we can barely afford this rent, but we're all here, and you're going to know somebody, and we're going to do this, and it's going to be awesome. Like, I was talking with Joe Lally from Fugazi, and the importance of...
he's a great guy.
He's the best guy. We did a project with my students, and he's just one of the nicest people in the world. But like,
absolutely,
the importance of the punk house is so like underrated. You think it's this grimy, like nasty place but the beauty that comes out of that, That's my spiel on that. But going through with that, so when you guys started writing together, is that when the connect with you and Paul really started to develop? Like
Exactly. So, my capacity with 3 Mile Pilot there was like the label was looking for some. This is all just a boring, stupid, standard major label ruining bands horseshit. But maybe they haven't heard it before. So yeah, again with the singles, they're like, we can't. Of course, they sign a band that they're like, this band is awesome, and then they're like, let's change the shit out of it until it's something so different that it's unrecognizable completely. So at any rate, yeah, just I became the A&R guy. I was like, oh, you got this new guy, maybe involve him a little bit. So yeah, we did that, and the label eventually decided that they didn't want to put it out. Luckily, they didn't shelve it; they gave it back. Like
that's cool.
No strings attached, which is awesome. They could have could have gone the other way. And just after that whole experience, and those guys had it longer than I did, but it was like let's do something that is purely creative and really like we can just do whatever we want. There's no limitations. There's no label saying what they want or what they don't want or whatever. And so that's kind of the birth of Black Heart, Paul and I wanting to do weird stuff and musical saw and everything goes. One of the first instruments that we used was a broken student xylophone that started our Waiter series. Like it was just anything around to be creative.
That's awesome. Well, Black Heart's got such this vibe, and it's like you say, it's a free vibe. There's this thing going in there, and like compositional wise, from where you go from there, really like with that first record, you can really hear stuff beginning and like. With you and Paul, was there like a certain moment within the 3 Mile Pilot writing, forced writing that like, was there a certain thing where you're like, he's into that, I'm into this is why this is working, or this, I can see us doing something cooler than this? Or was it like kind of just like we're vibing and he played what I thought he was going to play without me saying it type deal?
Well, let's see. It's a combination of things. Okay. So, and there's more to the story in terms of the sort of birth of Black Heart. We had been I was living with Paul actually. Like it just turned out that he had a room available. So I moved in with him, toward the end of 3 Mile Pilot and
out of the punk house.
Out of the punk house into Paul's house, the Black Heart house. So, and he had a bunch of, weird instruments. We had just broken up with our respective girlfriends and we're, in this sad mode. So things just kind of like, I don't know. I think we developed a connection aside. And my role with 3 Mile Pilot, it wasn't like huge. It was just, I ended up on a few songs. Yeah. On the record was released later through Cargo Records. But then I think it was just our desire to have this freedom and just sort of scorn and, go against all of this major label horseshit that we found so distasteful and unsavory and sad.
Well, that kind of goes back to like what we talked about earlier, what inspires certain projects or what conveys or draws people to certain projects is this passion and this like trueness to it. So you guys are coming from that and like respectively going through shitty situations and like kind of having a homie there to do that with is a huge deal. Just as going through a breakup or whatever, having a friend and then having a friend going through the same sitch, like there's something that relationship carries through, but to have a creative outlet like you guys did.
No, it was great. It was great. Well, another quick thing related to that is that something I don't think a lot of people get, especially with the first Black Heart record, it was very tongue in cheek. Like we were being sarcastic about it. It wasn't, if a lot of the lyrics were, there was heart in almost every title, like song title. Like we kind of were making fun of ourselves a bit. And I think that's part of this genuineness that comes through. It's like, not the usual, like, let's look at all the complete darkness and, focus on that. It was a little bit like, let's have some levity and laugh at ourselves. Like, this is absurdity. It's human life. And like, so I think that can help contribute to this, sense of genuinity that maybe people can connect with. Gotcha. There.
There's like, well, and even like, I don't know, what's the word? Sarcasm to some degree, or like the lack of like headiness. You know what I mean? Like almost like a kind of like nodding towards something that's like deep and heady, but also being light about it lets the delivery of that impact more, because you're like, oh, these guys are real dudes. Or like even like if you think of Dead Kennedys, like that music is so full of sarcasm, right? They're saying some serious shit, but like kill the poor, it's sung like Buddy Holly almost, you know what I mean? Like there's
Exactly,
like,
right.
there that makes so much more sense why it would be even more appealing then, you know. So when you guys branched into the scene playing out live, how was it taking like something like bringing this vibe into a venue? Like, because it at first, was it just the two of you, and then added a few members as you went on and as you needed people to fill in?
Yeah, more or less. And to this day, it's just sometimes we're in the mood to do something stripped down as a 2-piece. And then sometimes we're, in the mood to have a whole lot more people, or if they're available, or it's just, there's no sort of deliberate, I don't know, like direction there. It just kind of depends. But certainly early on, the idea with Paul and I was like, let's do this thing. It'll be our thing. And even in the early days, we're like, we can't say no to each other. Like, if you bring an idea, I can't say no. I just have to do something with it.
That's awesome.
And as far as bringing it, like playing live, something about Black Heart. If for those who haven't seen Black Heart live, it's not quiet. it's powerful. Awesome. And in the early days, the piano was, well, for the first 3 records, pretty much there was no bass guitar live. So the piano filled that role. So I would construct the sort of piano left-hand bass parts to be very like strong. And so whether or not it would be strong enough to have drums there. And it's not like I would turn down when there were no drums. So live, speaking about live, yeah, it's perhaps a different vibe than most people would think. And it was oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'm like a bit distracted today. But in terms of how it was accepted, yeah, I think people were, as with everything, a little bit confused at first, and then they're like, oh, this is cool, and okay.
Because like I imagine like live, depending on like some bands, when you see them live, or like when you see the performance live before you hear the record, like some things stick out more because you see it happening, right? Like with just the two of you making that whole vibe of and bringing it in a different way than it would be on the record, some people may be more drawn to that. And like oh, it's all these two guys. Where on the record you assume like, oh, it's those two guys, but one day he brought in the saw, the next day was the piano, like stuff was layered. But when you see it all come at one time, there's something to that. And like kind of going a question about piano playing, when going from guitar to like being able to like do the two-handed thing, was that a big challenge for you? Because I'm a guitar player, and like the two-handed thing on piano with me is like
yeah, this might have something to do with two things. Being left-handed, okay. I actually find it weird. So for me, being able to have my left hand as the fretting hand, which I consider to be the more difficult thing, is weird, but most people have they fret with the right hand. There's that. And then having been like a guitar nerd and into highly technical stuff, of course, tapping comes to
that's piano
to the picture. So it actually felt fine. Like I didn't have too much of an issue with it.
Cool. Was that like, it's interesting. Tapping sounds so lame on the piano. Like on the guitar, it's so sick. But part of that is the scene, right? You see the guy use both hands. You're like, ah. Because I was doing a lesson with my students about Van Halen, because he just passed, and I'm like, this guy changed a lot. And like I'm like, we were doing piano that day, so I found like a video of someone playing Eruption on the piano, and we watched down the guitar, and they were like, oh, sick. And then we watched the piano version, and they're like, huh. Like, because
right, that's just normal. That's how it goes on piano, right?
It sounds like, well, no, it just, because on guitar, like these pentatonic riffs with the distortion sound way cooler than just like the keys, like it sounds like jumbled madness a little bit, like
totally.
But all right, so okay, so you and Paul and like Black Heart, you guys did a lot of records, and like throughout this time, I imagine like that led to a lot of these other projects you kind of got involved with, because as Black Heart grew as a group and grew with a fan base, and like now with Black Heart, was it all you guys weren't label, right? Because this was all sorry.
No, I misunderstood. We weren't a label?
Yeah, or you weren't on a label, right?
Yeah. So we were. So the first Black Heart album came out on Cargo Records, which is a
same with
longtime San Diego, like Drive Like Jehu, Rocket, a bunch of great San Diego bands were on that label. And then for the second, third, fourth, and fifth records, we were on Touch and Go Records.
Gotcha. Oh, you know what? That makes sense, because there was the Fold compilation. They had one of your guys' tunes on there with like Black Motorcycle Club and other. I should have put that together. Yeah, that makes sense. There's a label.
Oh yeah, and then sixth record, Temporary Residence, after Touch and Go sort of changed their dynamic.
Okay. So as like you were involved with that, is that what kind of led to some of these other projects, like with Blond Redhead, which I always keep saying Redhead Blond, or I'm saying it backwards either way right now. But like, is that kind of what led to working with those guys?
Yeah, totally directly. So Touch and Go being a pretty punk rocky label, especially in terms of values, and you talk to Joe, so same kind of deal with like the Discord and everything. So part of that is like the label is kind of like all the bands on the label it's like a little family, and we ended up touring with some bands on the label, doing tours together. One of my favorites was Man or Aster Man. I don't know if you've heard of them.
No, I'll have to dive into that. It sounds cool.
Yeah, really cool, like high powered kind of like garage stuff with like live. They're insane. They have this like kind of 60s sci-fi aesthetic going on, and they have like a huge Tesla coil on stage. That's they use theremin. So yeah, we ended up touring like our music, kind of in core terms doesn't have much to do with each other, but like the theremin and the saw sound kind of similar. They're like this, they're sci-fi to where we're horror. So there are these other connections that worked really well. And so of course we ended up playing with each other on stage and all that. So this is what happened with Blonde Redhead. Pretty much we did some touring together, got kind of close, and we actually introduced them to the people at Bear Creek Studios, where they ended up recording this melody of Certain Damaged Lemons, and I think the next one, maybe even the next one. And so they asked if I would come play piano on a handful of songs. That's how that worked.
Okay. All right. What was it like?
So yeah, like you said, pretty much just like, through Black Heart, through meeting people based on that and through the label.
That's all. It's the beauty of how small the world gets is, I don't know, to me, like everything's so absurd, and the fact that this person or you come in is like, it makes no sense, but it's so beautiful at the same time, just per chance. So how is it working with those guys? Because they're a particular group and they got a vibe that I can see like where your like composition style kind of fits. Like jumping in, working with them, was it like a weird, as I imagine, because you do a lot of studio stuff, like, so you're probably used to just fitting the group and finding where they're coming from and matching what they're going for. But with that group in particular, was there any like interesting like I don't know, experience, or was it weird working with like a group as particular as them? Because they get like with 3 people in their band, like just live, they fill it.
Yeah. No, totally. Not so much. It was actually pretty, I don't know, everything felt fine. They sent me actually a cassette tape, with the songs that they had in mind, with some basic chord changes and like a primary melody with Kazu. I think maybe Kazu sang something. So I had these like skeletons, and I wrote the piano parts, based on that. And I flew up to the studio and recorded them. Yeah. And it worked. And also the thing with them is that record was a sort of like a changing point for them. Their sound drastically changed, on that album. Like, I think they kind of branched out. They had a more like, this more specific, like art rock, post-punk kind of thing going before, and that record they really opened up, and things sound kind of Beatles-ish or whatever. I think they just expanded their palette musically.
Because I think that
on
was,
that album.
That was like what, 2000, that release, the first one you said you did.
Yeah, boy, bad memory. Something like that.
Okay, all right.
Sense.
But so what kind of, okay, coming from like this thrash and like this, which is what Red Step's kind of like alluding to now, which is really cool. But when did like the idea of like compose, was it through Black Heart that your compositional skills like really kind of like developed and like techniques and stuff started to like manifest in your playing? Or was it like a study, a personal study you've done aside all this and just applied?
Well, again, for me, the thing that's important is the idea itself. So, for instance, like the one in your head. So to get that out, like for instance, I'll hear a piano thing in my head, and it can be a struggle, especially early on, like what you're talking about. Early on, I had to really figure out how to make that work, on piano or on organ before that. And then on drums or whatever, if you hear a kind of more complete piece, just figuring out how to make all those instruments, learning the technique. So for me, it's like, I didn't really try beyond making myself be able to play what I was hearing with an eye toward detail and understanding things like how the tone should be, how the notes should be struck. And then later with singing with Red Step, like how to, like what kind of vibrato do I want at the end of my voice? What should, all those little details that you have musically. So hearing those things and just making them happen is kind of how that works.
So that makes sense as you need to develop those skills you do. So before, I got some Red Step questions, but before getting to that, there's a couple projects that I don't think you ever recorded with that I'm kind of bummed about, but there was two cute boys. Whatever happened to that group? And
oh yeah. Okay, so what's the other one?
I was gonna say Bermuda Black Hand, or Bermuda and the Black Hand, which probably became Black Heart. But
I'm super. Yeah. Okay. I was curious how did you like? How did those like material? How did those come up?
I'm just gonna take the Nardward out and be like, "You're Toby. We need to know." I did an amount of research before talking, so.
That's a lot. Like, that's some serious business stuff that I wasn't even aware was available to be found anywhere.
Internet.
Two Cute Boys was. We played Rob Crow, who's I guess now known for Pinback and a bunch of his other tons of projects that he does.
Yeah,
I think we played a show. One of our earliest shows before we had a name was with Thingy, one of the Rob's main things he's done. And we didn't have a name, and so actually this is a super funny story. Like our local coffee shop that was near the punk rock house, where people would put flyers and everything. So I remember Paul and I went in there, and there was a flyer for that show, and it just said 2 cute boys for us. It was Rob. Rob did it, and we were like, "What the hell, buddy? Like that's not cool." But good, total Rob sense of humor. So I think we have him to thank for that. And Bermuda and the Black Hand was just before.
Okay.
We weren't sure, but that was what we had at the moment.
It's not a bad first incarnation. That's a cool name.
It's approaching. Yeah. It's close.
Well, the 2 Cute Boys should come out with the record, man. You got to bring that project back.
I'll talk to Paul. We're talking about doing some new Black Heart, but I'll be like, look, man.
Yeah.
It's this. Yeah.
This is a concept. That one show.
I think we should take it way back to the beginning. Right.
That's awesome. But okay, so now you're doing the Red Step, and it's drawing on these punk roots, this kind of threat. You're on guitar and you're fronting it, which is really cool because not that you weren't fronting it with Black Heart, but it's different when you're with someone else, right? When you're taking a project and you got your right hand man or left hand man, depending where you stand on the stage. But when you're going into it and you have someone with you, it's like we're doing this together. But when it's just on you, and I think this is a concept you've been going back and forth with for a while, right? The idea of the Red Step band.
Yeah, well, this all happened sort of organically, but yeah, no, I agree with you with the Black Heart thing. Like Paul and I are sort of a unit, and he has his role, but I think it's, we both consider ourselves necessary. And yeah, but yeah, for Red Step, it's more like I'm in the front with singing and playing guitar, which I'd never done before, especially the singing thing. So, sorry, I forgot your question.
Oh, it's all good. But yeah, man, I forgot how I phrased it.
Something about how did it happen, or how did I?
No. I think the project Red Step has been. I've read about it in a couple other things. So I think, has this been a thing you've been working on for a while, before now, like as a concept that you wanted to do this record and you wanted to front it, and take that role.
Okay, perfect. Yes, thank you for the reminder. So this happened like this. Like I moved here and met some of my wife's family. For instance, Vlada Markowski, who's her brother, who plays drums in the band. Rudy was a friend. Again, my coom, Boris, the keyboard player. Those guys all came from a band here called Kazna Zaushi, which was a kind of a 90s like garage, kind of like post-punky garage thing. I actually went to see them play. And like, wow, these guys are great players. And they ended up asking me like, well, you're this, American musician guy, and like, we should jam. And I was like, well, not so much into jamming, but why not? I had a few ideas. I had actually moved back to San Diego from Portland for a few months with the idea of kind of starting something different and new with some friends there. And so I already had this, I wanted to kind of pick the guitar back up again. So I had a few guitar ideas that were a little more, and also, you make 6 albums and spend all those, decade plus making sad stuff. It's like, okay, I need something better, like, or something different. Like I'm not necessarily depressed. I want to do something else. And then, so I had these ideas, we got together, and they're like, okay, like we just kept going, and songs kind of started working. And as for the singing thing, no, I actually was looking for a singer here, but I wanted someone who could sing in English and do it in a specific way. And I'll tell the story real quick again if it's not, we're not running out of time. But we had a guy. There's a guy, this guy Nikola Vrankovic here. He's from a kind of pretty popular like alternative band from the 90s called Blockout from Belgrade, and he's mutual friends with those guys. So, or he's a mutual friend. So he ended up coming to one of the practices, and I don't know. I asked him like, "Do you know anyone who could sing like this kind of way or in English or whatever?" And he's like, "Well, I don't know. Why don't you do it?" And it was like, wait, what do you mean? It just had never occurred to me that could be my role or something that I should do. And he said, "Look, go try it. Like, just go sing something. Like, you have an idea for melody?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Go do it right now." During the practice. So I did, and it was fucking horrible. But he's like, "Give it 6 months. You're going to be totally fine. Just keep going." So that's how that worked out. It was sort of an unintentional front. That's person. Awesome. I never really had it in mind as something deliberate. All these things just kind of unfolded as they did.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of it. And especially with like vocal stuff, like I just personally, as I developed vocal and like learning how to sing, and like it's different because with an instrument, like with the piano, with the guitar, this is a G. Every time I play it, it's a G. You know what I mean? Like I know that is going to be that, but when you sing, there's all these different variables, like your tone and how you hold your mouth position and how you breathe. There's all these little things that can either like disrupt that G note from being a G or whatever, and like, or just how that sounds and how it's interpreted, and like the fact that it's coming from you, literally, you're not hearing it and then internalizing it, but it's coming out and then you're hearing it. It's like it's a different thing, and it's a different challenge. And like, and the sing and play, it's a whole nother thing too, in the front of band, like you're doing. And like, so it's, for someone like you, who's this multi-instrumentalist, is like it sounds like the next big thing, like, how do I do this thing? My thing.
Right. Yeah, no, again, not deliberate, but it sort of just worked itself out. And I'm glad I did. It was a crazy challenge, and it was nice to be challenged. And not only in just what you're talking about with like understanding your voice and what where your voice can go. What should it sound like? What do I want it to sound like? But for me, writing lyrics, that's for Black Heart. That's, sort of Paul's role.
Gotcha.
I enter at the end, we look at it together, and, he's the guy who does that there. And so for me, that was another like challenge. So figuring out what I wanted, what I wanted to say, what should it mean? But yeah, I'm glad I did it. It was a fun exploration.
That's awesome. You have a really unique style too with writing. Like, is there a particular, like, Reset is really cool too. And compositionally, Reset's really cool. But sidetrack. But is there a particular writer or a poet, or like, is it Paul? Is it like hanging out with certain people that influenced how you write things, or your approach to writing?
I think it's all of the above, and plus I'm a super avid reader. I love reading. It's one of my favorite things. So having read a lot and reading a lot, I have a lot of words kind of floating around in sentences and structures and things that I like and appreciate happening, and also observation. Just seeing certain things, like really, like I'm a very indirect in terms of like musical influence. Like the things that influence me musically are kind of like, they're like ghosts and whispers of things that I've heard. And the things that influence me more directly are things like reading, observing the world. And then they all just sort of come together, I think.
That's awesome. I feel like musically that's what you want to do, because if you're like, oh, this guy's they sound like the Pixies, but they're not the Pixies. You know what I mean? Like if you can get the vibe of a thing and then have your direct message be there, it's kind of like the best way to do it. Like the going to the idea of that honest place, right? That we kind of talked about from the beginning, that this person means what they say. And like, you know what? I kind of like the Pixies too. And there's a vibe, not that I'm getting Pixies vibes, it's a random, example, but that's super interesting. Like as far as like reading, to pick your brain about that a little bit, like, are you like a novel guy, a philosophy guy?
I'm into the novel format a lot, and I like reading things like anything that's cerebral, makes you think. So in terms of philosophy, the things that make you question things, all of that's great. Or looking at a situation from different angles, wondering why it's occurring, not always just yelling about it. Like kind of questioning the nature of something is important to me. But that, let's see, like the last thing I read, Cormac McCarthy, amazing writer, like beautiful, just like amazing prose, nice. And dialogue, good, crazy dialogue. Anything that's smart and thoughtful, smart, thoughtful, and well-written, I like to read. And my favorite, I like to say, is there's an author, Mervyn Peake. He wrote this thing called Gormenghast. It's a trilogy, but he was also an artist. And this Gormenghast is basically, actually, I think it's Titus Groan is the first of the three. And it's about this family who live in this like decaying castle, that their previous aristocracy is just kind of falling apart, and around them, literally, their family and them and their home. So I kind of identified with that a lot.
That's a cool metaphor for it. And
yes.
The novel's way interesting too, because like the philosophical standpoint or point, I feel like when it's in a narrative is more understood, or you're able to relate to it more than the philosophy would be like the textbook. Like, here's a problem, here's the ways to look at it. But if you apply it to like a character and the situation they're going through, there's that way to relate to it more and more in-depthly. No,
absolutely. No, super great point. I totally agree. And just, we've all experienced all kinds of stuff. And when you see, that's the crafty writing I really like, is when, and also with symbolism. Like, I don't think it should be forced. I don't think it should be pushed at you. I think it should be there. And if you want to enjoy, I really love enjoying a story. Yeah. But I like there to be sort of like undercurrent or something happening beneath it. If you want to pay attention more, you can. But I think both things are kind of necessary. And I think some, more academic writers focus on these literary devices, and, the more popular writers are more focused on story. But really, I love when both of those things are happening together very well.
Was it? I agree. I think, like, I don't know, like with anything that makes you think or feel, for me, like if it's a film or if it's a novel, like if I don't feel like I understood it and have to go back into it, and there's room within that text or that film to do that, that's when I know it clicked. You know, and I'm like, wow, why'd they do that?
Totally.
You know, what I mean? Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you can put that in that, and like, wait, if I look at it in the story of the Four Horsemen, that, or you know, fill in the blank, you're like, it's so exciting when you find something to challenge your understanding of a thing, and like it's so much more entertaining to do that and like pick your own brain about it.
Absolutely, I agree. And even just in terms of observation, which I find to be a big influence for me, it's just like watching how people interact with each other, and you know, maybe they're so close to it, or we all are sometimes. We fall into these routines and start behaving a certain way. And you see, I don't know, like for instance, kind of Reset was actually, that came about, that I remember the moment that I started thinking about that was I was getting on a bus here. I drive, but I hate driving. So here I just take the public transportation. But I remember getting on a bus and watching these people just swarm each other and like step all over each other to get on the bus. And it was like, what the fuck, man? Like, how's this is just, it was like, it struck me as incredibly sad. And so I was like, what are these people are just like, you know, do they realize what they're doing? Are they just so entrenched in this routine that they don't see how, you know, like sad and disappointing this behavior is? And
what is it? I think most of the time they don't, because as soon as you see what you're doing, like even with kids, like when if they're treating one kid another way, when you treat them like that, they get it. Or you know what I mean? Like the seeing yourself, or even just hearing yourself recording wise, you're like, oh snap, that didn't feel that good. You know what I mean? But that makes so much sense with after listening to that song quite a bit and hearing the origin of it.
Right.
A side question with the Red Step is the Red Step. I mean, I know right now everything is probably where you're at now too. Is everything's like probably shut down and there not too much is going on publicly. But does Red Step plan to get involved with Basic Rules at all, like Black Heart's doing? I think that's Paul's thing, right?
Oh yeah, Paul. I'm wearing that T-shirt right now, and I think
Nice.
and our keyboardist Boris, that's his Facebook. Like,
oh, okay, cool.
backgrounds. Yeah, so I don't know if it's a direct, you know, not directly, but everyone that's the idea.
Okay,
I think a lot of all of our projects. I mean, those should literally be the basic rules.
Yeah, well, I think that's such a great a great idea and a great project to be like pushing, and like just kind of based off the story of Reset, you know, it leads to that a little bit, and like I think that's awesome that your band now is into it, because like I'm hoping more bands get into it, and hoping you guys can expand that and get a bunch of people involved, because like it's a solid idea, man. And like
it's great. Yeah. No, I'll talk to Paul and see, you know, what he has in mind with certain things. But I mean, without it being, you know, on the surface, it's like that's the interior already.
Yeah.
that's the idea.
Awesome. Cool. And is there any plans now, like as far as the shutdown, what's that look like where you guys are at? Like, is everyone locked in type deal, or it sounds like people
okay. Yeah, I'll explain how it like how things look here and how they happened. So we're currently on, we're at the peak of our what I think is the peak, I hope, of the third wave. Oh, so there was the first one in like April, March, April. And so here the maximum, like the highest peak was like a little bit under 500 infections a day. And that was like the highest. And again, that same thing happened in all of Serbia, which has 7 million people, for a bit of reference. And then again, July, August, same deal. Like, you know, peak of 500 infections per day at the worst. And then now, 2 days ago, we had 6,300 infections in one day, and it started growing. So can you imagine, like more than 12 times the amount of when the pandemic was. Yeah. You know, people were taking it seriously in the beginning. Well, now it's 12 times worse. And I really, really hope that this is not some model of some kind of indication of what might happen in the States, because that would be like insanely catastrophic.
Yeah. So,
but it went from, to answer your question also more simply, like, it used to be like, well, people know, I think my friend's dad had it, or, I know someone whose sister had it. Now it's like half the people I know, have it or know people who've had it. Personally, I know tons of people here who've had it. So that's what it is. So no lockdown in the beginning. They did some pretty serious, like really, really strict lockdowns. Like no one allowed out on the weekends at all.
Wow.
And they had things shut down on the weekdays. I think it was from 5 p.m. until 7 or 8 a.m. Like just no one could be out. So it was like seriously strict in the beginning. But now there's really not much. It's just, suggestion. And, you should be wearing masks. But of course, venues not working. I think they're going to institute some more, or implement rather, some more measures coming up this next week. We'll see.
Sounds like, at least with Cleveland, numbers
I was going to ask
a little different, but they're doing the same thing. They're like, make sure you wear your mask. And maybe next week we'll figure something out. But the reason I bring that up is because, like, I'd imagine that leads to some more time recording wise. And you mentioned a while ago about doing a solo piano record with like space and like no words or whatever in cello. Any idea or any thoughts about that? Maybe that project coming to fruition now that there might be less performance time.
That would be cool. There's actually an idea that my wife and I have. And incidentally, my wife Mariana does all of the artwork for the Red Step. So anything, if anyone happens to see, she's responsible for that. And also she did the last 2 Black Heart album covers.
Nice.
Like the Waiter, we did a vinyl release of the Waiter series and a re-release of the first album, and she did that stuff. So she's a super talented designer. Yeah. But we had this idea to do some kind of visual and musical combination that would be pretty much something like what you were talking about on my side. Something like really space, just kind of dark and slow and with a lot of space, and maybe having one instrument to weave in and out of there, and then having some kind of visual component if we did it live. But now the landscape has changed so much, I don't know when that would happen.
Well, yeah, man. I don't know. I'm. It's super exciting that you're getting involved with the studio and trying to like, kind of like as someone like with your talent and ability, and especially for composition, to be involved with other projects and these up and coming bands, like, because to have that guy is so important. To have someone when you're doing a record, and like to have someone who's actually going to try to help and enhance what you're doing with the whole skill set, like as an up and comer that you would not have had just because you're starting. So to kind of go back to that, I think that's so cool that you're diving into that now, and like your whole skill set's going to make that like take whoever comes through those doors to the next level. So that's a super exciting to hear that. And I don't know, I'm always about the youth moving forward. And
I wanted to ask you about what it is that you do, and you mentioned teaching, working with kids. So if you wouldn't mind.
No. So I'm a full-time musician. I'm out of Cleveland, Ohio, and I teach an adapted music course at a charter school for kids with autism, pre-K to senior high. And like so it's like an academic course, but I get to adapt it to where they are and what their needs are. And like so it goes from like because I went to CSU for jazz and music therapy. So I kind of come from that. But so it goes from like students who are nonverbal to students who are like totally like hyper focused on a thing. It's like the whole spectrum of everything. And like that's my day gig. And then I would do nursing home gigs, and like I play in an original rock group called Sea Level, letter C dash, and a couple of like, ensembles and stuff. So like and you know how it is, like if doing music, you do a million things just that's your thing. And like so I knew the band's been growing fairly well, and then like the whole pandemic stuff has kind of set it back, and luckily I've been doing the teaching thing for the last 5 years, and that's been more rewarding than I can ever ask for. But that's kind of my spiel of what I do.
Great. Awesome. That's amazing what you're doing. Yeah, sounds great. And I also teach.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, teaching. So when you mentioned, teaching and how it can be, especially with kids. I don't teach usually little kids, but more like teenagers.
Gotcha.
So,
but I feel like those are
the idea. Oh yeah, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say those are the ones that, with the skill set you have, like they're going to run with it the most. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like little kids are fun, and like you're working on those like sharing and like interacting skills. But like with teenagers, it strikes because you know that spot way more clearly, and you can like the golden nuggets they might need to hear. But sorry, I didn't cut you off.
No, not at all. Yeah, that's great. No, super good advice, and thanks. My idea here was to do something sort of like the School of Rock. Cool. Except have little bit of a different focus. I mean, I don't know a ton about School of Rock, but what I've seen is sort of like you gather the kids up and they pick a song and they learn it and they learn their instruments. My idea was a little bit different, like being able to teach give individual lessons for whatever, and figure out what they want to play. Because sometimes you might have someone who's playing guitar, but then you get them around a drum set that they've never really considered playing. And then they're the killer drummer. Yeah. They're like, oh, wow, I could do that. So kind of figuring out, first of all, like where, each person's talent, or what they really help them figure out what they want to do. And then from there, rather than having them play some kind of, pick a song and play it, is like teach them how to create, like teach them some songwriting basics and give them some ideas and kind of just direct them into being able to make their own thing. And I'm not sure how it is in the States, but here it's like, this is a classic guitar lesson thing. Like, what do you want to do? I want to learn A, B, or C song. Yeah. It's like, I kind of wanted to change the focus to like a little more, creative and giving them the tools to be creative.
That's awesome. I think that's great.
But now with pandemic, who knows? So
yeah. That's
of course to do studio, so they could then record their song there. So kind of tried the idea to have it all in the same house, under the same roof.
That's cool. Like that's so cool because you have those connections and you can do that. And like as a kid, especially a teenager, someone who has to connect, you become another type of validation. Like, oh, Toby, he knows what he's doing. Like he knows what. Like we're actually going to go record this. All right, and then you kind of speak more clearly to them just because of your background and your connections, and like they see that, and like that makes that whole experience more real. And like when you're in that age, that's what really strikes, is when the things, shit, this is actually happening. And like I think you're gonna come up with a badass program, like when stuff gets better and like when you're able to do stuff. I think it's gonna be really cool. And like I want to touch base and hear that how that goes, man. That sounds awesome.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. No, I'm looking forward to it. It seems like interesting, exciting, and helpful to other people, and maybe giving someone else a different perception, helping them see things differently than they may have, figuring out where their talent lies. Maybe they'll figure out that they, want to be a writer. They are like, what's this lyric writing thing all about? And who knows? Just opening doors a bit for people would be super awesome. Well, but we'll see where it goes. Yeah, with when it's possible is another issue. Hopefully soon.
Yeah. And you can combine it with the basic rules thing. Oh man, you got this lined up. You got the. That's awesome.
Yes, all the values and all some it's subjective but good, hopefully good music.
Yeah.
And
it's so cool because like that's the punk ethic, right? There's the values, and you do the thing, and you express yourself, and you live up to the values you claim you have, or the moral mindset you claim to have, and like I don't know. Well, I think it's going to be really cool. You got 13 songs with Red Step, right? And 2 of them are out. I'm going to put
that's right.
both of them on the pod, so I'll have one start it off, and I'll have one cap it.
Hey, great, thanks. Yeah, there were 2 that we released prior to hooking up with Pravda Records, so there are 4 out.
Oh, okay.
We released the 2 singles through them in the last couple months, and then before that, there were a couple other things in the last few years.
Gotcha. I'll have to dig those up, man. Cause like I saw the 2 on Spotify and the 2 on YouTube. They have the videos to go with it because Howard sent it to me, and then I was able to navigate it. And like But I have to dig up the other ones, man, because I really dig what's coming out now. Like, I don't know, to do all the things, like I'd listen to a shit ton of punk music and I just drink a shit ton of coffee. I mean, like, and like, so that was right up my vibe. And like, it's beautiful stuff, man. Like,
thank you. Oh yes, an interesting thing that I think is important. Both Reset and Black Summer were written around 4 years ago.
Whoa.
So Black Summer was actually that's literally about when Trump was on the cusp of being elected.
Yeah.
Like, that was what that's about. I wasn't sure and it just spilled out of me. I had the pen just moved itself. And I wasn't sure why it was like, what is this Black Summer thing? It should be like Black Autumn or Fall or something. But I just kept it as it was, and it turned out to be this like super unfortunate kind of prediction of the state of things later.
Vocal delivery on that's great too, man.
Oh, thanks.
What was it?
Yeah, I was pissed at Trump.
So if it's sadness is a different type of, it's internalized as anger, it comes out a different way, and like.
Right.
Yeah.
And then same thing with Reset, even though it has this sort of connection of now with some weird connections with that song and the current state of things. But again, it wasn't like deliberate. I didn't try to, they weren't a reaction to this situation. They were a prediction.
Gotcha. Sometimes it just happens like that when you're like in that mindset of what could happen. There's like, I think there's a weird ether. Everyone's got these thoughts and it comes together somehow. And like, that's interesting. Like I'll tag this part I'll cut this little bit we're doing now into the rest of it because I think that's important and lines up with the story of Reset and like how it totally, or where it came with the other predictions with Black Summer involved with the same mindset or like the same writing kind of mindset of just reacting and like predictions part of that, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Reacting to what could happen.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was even a little weird about having those released because I didn't want them to be at all perceived as a reaction. I felt that would be a bit like distasteful. And so that's one thing that's important. I was even weird about releasing them with this caveat. So
interesting. Well, that makes sense because you don't want to be like, oh, I'm just kind of doing the trend and preaching like everyone else is. But those are true feelings and thoughts, so they deserve to be out there. And I think, as a listening to it, and as you can definitely dig in and get where the songs come from, but you can also not at the same time. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's.
Yeah. We didn't talk about that. Like this like direct. Sorry to go ahead.
No. I was going to say that where you're going is where probably what I was going to ask. So keep going.
Yeah. Okay. It was a prediction. So yeah, I like lyrics. Like the lyrics for me that resonate most are the kind that are, for the most part, like indirect or interpretable. So, you could have a group of 10 people and they all might think the song is about something different. Yeah. I don't know, like the Beatles stuff, and like no one knows, and they probably didn't either. So like even though like I tend to latch on to some kind of thematic thing on my own, like for myself, in terms of lyric writing, I like things to sorry, I can't talk anymore. I like things to work out in a way that it's everyone can sort of feel like their personal experiences can connect with it based on their personal experiences. And so I think that can help, things mean more to people when they listen. So you're not being preached at or told. Yeah. It's like, here's this thing and you may connect with it, and it may not be what the author intended, but if it connects, great. Like, and especially in a hopefully positive way. I find that important. But then, of course, there's some pretty damn direct stuff that's great.
Yeah, for sure.
Talking about
it's a weird duality, right? Like, I think that allowing them to interpret themselves involves them, right? And anyone who's involved in something is more interested in it. And that's just, like, if you're part of the show, you're showing up to the gig, if you're just like, yeah, maybe I will, I might just do nothing at home. But, like, when you're involved, and like as a writer, when you can involve someone like that, I think it makes impact more. But Toby, thank you so much for talking with me this last hour plus whatever. It's been great, man. I've really enjoyed digging into your music and researching your career. and I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It was a fun conversation. I know the podcast can be sort of weird, and I've tried previously to kind of like ask more questions, and sometimes people are like, well, I felt like I'm breaking protocol. So it's interesting to this format. And again, that was great. You were great. And thanks for having me, for sure.
Thank you.
It was fun.
So much for doing this. This was awesome. All right, guys, that was it. That was me and Toby Nathaniel. To take us out, we got one more song from the Red Step. Here we go with the second release, Reset.